The steady beep of medical monitors slowly faded into my consciousness. My eyelids felt impossibly heavy as I struggled to open them. The sterile hospital smell hit me first, followed by the realization that something was very wrong. I'm Sophia Chen, and I was about to discover that my 3-month coma was just the beginning of my nightmare. "Dr. Miller." "She's awaking," a nurse called out. The room suddenly burst into activity, voices murmuring medical jargon I couldn't quite grasp. As my vision slowly cleared, I saw unfamiliar faces peering down at me, their expressions a mix of surprise and relief. "Mrs. Chen, can you hear me? Blink twice if you can understand," the doctor said clearly. I managed 2 deliberate blinks, my throat too dry to speak. "Remarkable," he muttered, scribbling something on his chart. "We weren't sure you'd ever wake up. The accident was quite severe." Accident? My mind felt foggy as I tried to piece together my last memories. I remembered driving home from work on a rainy evening. Then, nothing. Over the next few days, as I regained my strength and ability to speak, the full story emerged. A drunk driver had run a red light, sending my car spinning into a concrete barrier. I'd suffered severe head trauma and had been in a coma for 3 months. But something felt off about my recovery period, specifically the complete absence of my husband Michael and his family. "Where's my husband?" I asked the nurse during one of her routine checks. She hesitated, an uncomfortable look crossing her face. "I think I should let Dr. Miller discuss that with you." When Dr. Miller arrived, his expression was grave. "Mrs. Chen, there's something you should know. Your husband Michael has been relatively absent during your stay here. His mother, Mrs. Patricia Chen, has been handling most of your affairs as your medical proxy." A chill ran down my spine. Patricia had never approved of me, viewing me as beneath her precious son because I came from a middle-class background while they were old money. She'd made her disapproval clear from the day Michael first brought me home. "What do you mean, handling my affairs?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Well, about a month ago, she began the process of having you declared mentally incompetent, claiming the doctors had told her you were brain dead and would never recover. She used this to what?" I demanded, my heart racing. "To sell your house. The family home you inherited from your parents." The room started spinning. My house, the beautiful Victorian my parents had lovingly restored over decades, the home they'd left to me when they retired to Arizona, had been sold? Without my knowledge or consent. "That's impossible," I gasped. "She had no right. She presented documentation showing she had power of attorney," Dr. Miller explained gently. "Though in light of your recovery, there may be some legal questions about how that was obtained." My mind raced. The house was worth at least $1.5 million in the current market. More importantly, it was my last connection to my parents, filled with memories and treasures from my childhood. And Patricia had sold it while I lay helpless in a hospital bed? "Where's Michael now?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger. "He's been staying with his mother since the sale went through. I believe they're handling the distribution of the proceeds today." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears of rage. But then, something clicked in my mind. Something Patricia couldn't have known about. Something that would turn her scheme on its head. You see, 6 months before the accident, I'd discovered some disturbing information about Patricia's business dealings. She'd been embezzling from her own company, using elaborate schemes to hide the money in offshore accounts. I'd kept quiet about it, gathering evidence and consulting with a lawyer friend about the best way to approach the situation. As a precaution, I'd set up an ironclad trust for my house, with specific conditions that would make any sale without my explicit consent not just invalid, but criminally fraudulent. The paperwork was hidden in a safety deposit box, along with evidence of Patricia's financial crimes. "Dr. Miller," I said, my voice suddenly steady, "I need a phone and a laptop. And please, don't let anyone know I'm awake yet." Over the next 2 days, I made careful preparations. My lawyer, David Martinez, was shocked but delighted to hear from me. He immediately began setting things in motion to reclaim my property and build a case against Patricia. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. David's investigator confirmed that Patricia and Michael were at their family estate, celebrating their windfall from the sale of my house. It was time for my grand entrance. I had a nurse help me dress in clothes David had brought, a sharp black pantsuit that hid how much weight I'd lost during my coma. My legs were shaky, but determination kept me standing as I was wheeled out of the hospital and into David's waiting car. The drive to the Chen estate felt surreal. I'd spent countless uncomfortable dinners there, enduring Patricia's subtle jabs and condescending remarks. Now I was returning to bring her whole world crashing down. David parked at the end of the long driveway. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "We could handle this through official channels." I shook my head. Some things need to be done in person. Walking up to the house, I could hear laughter through the open windows. As David rang the doorbell, I straightened my spine and took a deep breath. The maid who opened the door took one look at me and dropped the cleaning cloth she was holding. "Mrs. Sophia. But you're dead." I finished for her. Not quite. I walked past her, following the sound of voices to Patricia's study. Through the partially open door, I could see her sitting at her massive mahogany desk, stacks of cash spread out before her as she counted with gleeful precision. Michael lounged on a leather sofa nearby, scrolling through his phone with disinterest. "That's $1,200,000, Patricia announced proudly. "After expenses and your commission for helping with the paperwork, Michael, we're looking at quite a nice profit." I pushed the door open fully. "I hope you kept the receipts," I said clearly. "You'll need them for the fraud investigation." Patricia's head snapped up, her face draining of color as if she'd seen a ghost. In a way, I suppose she had. "I'm impossible," she screamed, standing so abruptly that several stacks of bills scattered across the floor. Michael jumped up, his phone clattering to the ground. "Sophia? But how?" "Surprise," I said coldly. "I'm not quite as brain dead as you were led to believe." Patricia recovered quickly, her shock turning to calculating anger. "This changes nothing. The house has been sold, legally and properly. I had power of attorney." "Forged power of attorney," David corrected, stepping into the room behind me. "We have proof of that, by the way. But more importantly," he pulled out a thick folder. "The house was never yours to sell." I savored Patricia's confusion as David explained about the trust I'd established. "Any attempt to sell the property without the explicit, notarized consent of Sophia Chen automatically triggers several legal mechanisms," he concluded, "including a criminal fraud investigation that will look very closely at everyone involved and their finances." Patricia's face went from white to gray. She knew exactly what a detailed investigation of her finances would reveal. "You can't do this," she whispered. "I can and I am," I replied. "But that's not all. Michael, would you like to know what your mother's been doing with the company money? The evidence is quite fascinating." Michael looked between us, confusion evident on his face. "Mother? What is she talking about?" "Nothing," Patricia snapped. "She's clearly confused from her injury. We should call security." "Oh, call them," I encouraged. "In fact, let's call the police too. I'm sure they'd be very interested in these offshore account statements." The next few hours were chaos. Police were indeed called, but not by Patricia. They left with her in handcuffs, along with boxes of evidence from her home office. Michael, upon learning the full extent of his mother's crimes and his own unwitting participation in her fraud, broke down completely. "I didn't know," he kept saying. "She told me you were brain dead, that the doctors were certain. She said selling the house was what you would have wanted. And you believed her?" I asked quietly. "Without question. Without even visiting me in the hospital to see for yourself." His silence was answer enough. Within weeks, my house was legally returned to me. Patricia's attempt to sell it had been completely invalidated by the trust's provisions. She faced multiple federal charges for both the attempted property fraud and her years of embezzlement. Michael, while cleared of deliberate involvement in the fraud, had signed several documents that implicated him in the scheme. He accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony against his mother. As for me, I filed for divorce as soon as I was strong enough to leave the rehabilitation center. The house needed some repairs. Patricia's hasty attempt to sell it had left several maintenance issues unaddressed. But every minute I spent restoring it helped heal something in my soul. The recovery process was long and challenging. Learning to walk properly again, regaining my strength, dealing with the emotional trauma of betrayal. None of it was easy. But each small victory felt sweeter, because I knew I'd stopped Patricia from stealing not just my property, but my dignity. 1 year later, I stood in my garden, admiring the roses my mother had planted decades ago. They'd survived Patricia's attempt to uproot them, growing back stronger than ever. Kind of like me, I thought with a smile. The doorbell rang, my lawyer David, coming to deliver news about Patricia's sentencing. As I walked through my house to answer it, I ran my hand along the familiar walls, grateful for every step, every breath, every moment of being alive and awake in my own home. Patricia had thought my coma was her opportunity to take everything from me. She never knew that her own greed would be her undoing, or that her actions would ultimately free me from a family that had never truly accepted me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting free. Epilogue. Patricia was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for embezzlement and fraud. Her attempt to steal my house had led investigators to uncover decades of financial crimes, affecting hundreds of people. The company she'd stolen from eventually recovered most of the money, though her reputation in the business world was permanently destroyed. Michael moved across the country after our divorce was finalized. Last I heard, he was working as a middle manager at a small company, no longer able to coast on his family's connections. He sends me occasional emails, full of apologies I'm not yet ready to accept. I still live in my house, though it's changed as much as I have. I've modernized some things while preserving the historical character my parents loved so much. The garden is my pride and joy now. I find peace in nurturing growing things, in watching life flourish where others tried to create decay. David and I developed a close friendship through the ordeal. He's a frequent dinner guest, and while neither of us is ready to put a label on our relationship, we enjoy exploring the possibilities. Sometimes at night, I sit in my father's old study, surrounded by the family photos and mementos Patricia tried to erase. I think about how close I came to losing everything, and how the very precautions I took to protect myself from one threat ended up saving me from another. Life has a way of surprising you like that. You never know when you're going to need the strength you're building today. But if you stay true to yourself and plan carefully, even the worst betrayals can become stepping stones to something better. As for me, I've learned that family isn't always about blood or marriage. Sometimes it's about the people who stand by you when others try to tear you down. My house isn't just a building anymore. It's a symbol of survival, of justice, and of the power of being prepared for life's darkest moments. Every morning when I wake up in my own bed, in my own house, I smile. Because I know that somewhere in a federal prison, Patricia is waking up in a cell, regretting the day she thought she could take what was mine. Some people might call it karma. I call it justice.